Hello, my name is Jill Berry Bowen, CEO of Northwestern Medical Center, and your host of the NMC Health Beat Show, dedicated to discussing important healthcare topics that are interesting to you in our community. Today, I'll be talking with Susan Casavant. She is an occupational therapist with NMC's Rehabilitation Services Department. She's been here on our team for 15 years. And on this segment, we're going to be talking about driver evaluation and driver safety. So good morning, and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. You're welcome.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, I started giving this some thought, in preparing for this, and how would this relate to me? And I'm thinking, this probably is in every family.
It is.
When you think about this. But before we get right into the evaluation and safety, what do you do at Northwestern Medical Center? You probably do more than this. So I want to hear about you.
So as an occupational therapist, I'm interested really in how people manage all of their daily living activities across the lifespan. So in previous jobs, I worked with in the neonatal intensive care unit. I worked with pediatrics. A lot of my background is working with adults with neurological issues. So that's brain injury, spinal cord injury, trauma. And really what we do is we do a full musculoskeletal evaluation. We do a whole cognitive and visual perceptual evaluation. I look at how people put all of that together to manage all of their daily living activities. So it could be seemingly simple things like putting on your shoes and socks to more complex things like how do I make a meal? How do I clean my house? How do I get around town? And that includes driving, which is one of our daily living activities that most of us participate in.
Sure. So what type of background do you have to be able to conduct these evaluations?
So a lot of the training is done in school, but I actually have extensive experience and training in working with folks with visual perceptual issues, cognitive issues, and that requires actually additional training, yearly conferences. I've worked closely with a couple of the level 1 trauma centers in developing the program at Northwestern Medical Center. So I've got extensive additional training in looking at cognition and vision and visual perceptual issues.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You never spend time thinking about that, so that's very interesting. So how do you evaluate folks? What does it take, and how do they make their way to you? How do people know that I should have an evaluation, a driver evaluation?
Quite often it's actually family members that are concerned and bring it forward to either that person or to the family physician. People come to me and they say, I'll know when I have to stop driving, but many people don't. Many people don't. And really it's the cognitive and the visual perceptual issues that are the greatest challenges. If it's just that I have weakness in one arm or I've lost sensation in one leg, those are really the easy fixes. The not so easy fixes are problems with memory, attention, do I know where I'm going? All of the cognitive and visual perceptual concerns are the bigger challenges. And often people, if they've got poor memory, they don't understand how that can impact their ability to drive safely.
Sure. So if I'm a family member, so in thinking about our viewers, what are some of the early signs maybe? What should I be looking for? What are the warning signs before it gets too late?
Yeah. So I would say one of the big warning signs is, people that have memory issues. Some of the more concrete things are, I hear people saying, I got to Hannaford's or to the shopping center the other day, but I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be doing there. Getting places, taking a really long time to get places. If it only typically takes you, 20 minutes to get to your daughter's house, but it takes 3 hours that day, that's a warning sign.
Sure, of course,
and these really are concrete examples. Dents and bumps in the car. Extra paint on the car in places it shouldn't be.
No, wait a minute, I might have some of that.
Driving too slow, driving fast, near misses. Those are all, especially when you put that all together. But I would say one of the first signs is that when people start demonstrating memory issues.
Okay.
That's a big warning sign for me that it needs to at least be looked at.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm noticing some memory issues with my dad, for example.
Yeah.
So do I talk to the family? Do I talk to my primary care physician or my dad's, or what do I do with it now that I've got this feeling about this?
So I think the very first thing that we all should be doing is talking with our loved one directly about it.
Okay.
Now, often that's met with resistance. Often people don't know how to talk to their family member about it. Often it doesn't go well. So at that point, then the next step would be to talk to the family physician about it.
Okay.
And I would even recommend going with your family member to the family physician and talking about it together, and then coming up with a plan, which might be coming to see someone like me.
Sure. So we're with you now. The primary care physician says, yeah, I think we ought to look into this. So what do you do? What's this look like?
So I spend probably an hour and a half to 2 hours sometimes with people. It usually takes, especially if I'm having to give them the news that they can't drive any longer.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I spend quite a bit of time with people, but one of the first things I do is I take a look at their range of motion, joint mobility. I look at their strength, coordination, sensation, both arms and legs. I do an extensive, I'm going to say, cognitive evaluation kind of throughout the evaluation that starts with something simple as, can you just, write down your name and home address for me? Write down your name, today's date, and home address for me.
Interesting.
I have to remember 3 things when I'm asking that. It gives me a good idea of what their memory is like. It gives me a good idea of what their hand coordination is like. And then we go from there. We look at vision and visual perception, and then kind of how people put that all together. So depending on the results of the evaluation, typically it could go 3 ways. It might, be me saying, I think things are perfectly fine right now, but you might, at some point you're going to have to consider, like most of us, are going to have to consider giving up driving. Now's the time to start planning for that. It might be that I'm sending people on to, there's actually a driving rehab program at Fletcher Allen where they take people out on the road if it's appropriate to do that. Quite often I'm having to talk to people about ceasing from driving, stopping driving. And if that's the case, then I might see them for another couple of treatment sessions to then figure out, okay, how do you handle your life now that you can't drive?
Right. Yeah, we plan for retirement, but we don't plan on what we're going to do with our driving and how we're going to get to different places. And so, taking their license away, that's a really big deal.
Oh, it's huge.
So, what are the options that exist for someone like they always go, their routine is always to go, to the post office or to go out to lunch every day. What do they do?
So there are options, and obviously the farther you get from, I'm going to say, the town centers, the harder that is.
Yes.
In Franklin County, we do have GMTA, which is, I think, the Green Mountain Transit Agency.
Yes.
They have a regular route right through town, and I think they take a certain distance deviation. So I could call them up and say, I'm up on Ward Terrace, I'm up on Smith Street, I'm up on can you come get me if you call in advance? But there's a regular loop that they do throughout the day in town. There are taxis. There's the biggest resource, hopefully, is the community and family members that can bring people to regularly scheduled events like church, or if they go shopping once a week, or if they're going to Bridge once a week, or those types of activities.
So when you have someone that's sort of on the edge, maybe not quite ready to take the license, and you mentioned about going to like a little school to get some enhancements, I think, are there other tips that you give folks when, is there ways to make it last longer to keep that license when they're right on the edge? Any tips that you have?
There really aren't. So I'm going to break it into 2 categories. One is people that are recovering from a brain injury or stroke. We would, or similar type issues, who are going to continue to get better. We would continue to work with them in terms of looking at their cognition or strength or things that we can help them with. There's another group that is, I'm going to say, declining. Their memory is
Sure.
getting worse. And sometimes we just have to say, we need to plan now. If it's not going to get any better, we need to plan now in terms of what can we do from here on in. Because otherwise we're just really delaying the inevitable of, at some point you're going to have to give up driving.
Mm-hmm. So are there any other specifics that someone needs to be aware of that when they come for this evaluation, either the family needs to know or the individual? Any other specifics that they should prepare for in your evaluation or safety discussion?
Nothing that they necessarily need to prepare for. When someone comes to see me, I get a good idea of what their background is, who they are, who their family is, what their role is in the community, how active they are in the community, kind of getting a sense of who they are. Because then for me, I can help them plan in terms of what do we do next. Earlier you asked, are there things that people can do?
Yeah.
And certainly I think about, as we all get older, there are things that we can do to help ourselves stay healthy. And when I think about driving, there's 3 things that I really think about. One is getting good exercise in, getting good cardiovascular exercise in, certainly working on resisted exercises, but I think there's really good evidence that demonstrates folks that get good cardiovascular exercise in are able to maintain things like their memory and their cognitive skills, or even improve it, actually. So good cardiovascular exercise, which makes sense if you get your blood pumping, you're perfusing your brain better. So getting good exercise in, challenging your brain in terms of, I'm going to say, brain fitness every day. So the best evidence actually is learning new activities. So learning learning a new language, learning a new task, a new game, a new skill. But even doing things like making sure you're really challenging your brain every day.
Yeah.
And the third thing that I would say is staying connected to your community. And it's not necessarily that you have to be living with someone, but participating in community activities, because then when you do need assistance, there's a whole network of people out there to help support you. And certainly the people that are most successful in maintaining their independence, even if they can't drive, are the people that are connected with their community.
That makes great sense.
Yeah, it does.
It's easy, and I think this is extremely useful information, to our viewers of how to stay as fit as possible and to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah.
That this is probably inevitable, but there's some things you can do to slow it, potentially.
Right, slow it, and to manage it, to plan for it.
Plan it, yeah.
I think that I heard a statistic recently in the last couple of years that the majority of us outlive our ability to drive safely by 10 to 15 years.
Oh.
We're living longer.
Yeah.
So we really do need to plan ahead. And sometimes people think, well, I don't need to plan for 15 years down the road. But if you're planning on moving and you're older, one of the things you really should consider is, if I can't drive any longer, how will I get to town?
Yeah.
Those types of things.
Yeah, that really does help you focus in on what your needs are, what your desires are, and making sure you put yourself in the middle of that.
Right.
If you're going to relocate.
Right.
Yeah, to make it easier, make it less complicated. Well, our time is, coming to a close. But I'll tell you, this has been the most interesting conversation, and I think something that is extremely useful for our community. I mean, all of us to be thinking about. If we're not there, but our families are there, our grandparents, our parents,
our neighbors.
Yeah.
And it's a frightening conversation for people to have. It really is. It's a scary conversation. It's hard to bring up, and sometimes when I talk with people about retiring from driving, it takes their breath away. It's hard to fathom. So that's why I say planning ahead of time, having the conversations with your loved ones early.
Yeah.
Early. Mom, if you can't drive 10 years from now, if you can't drive 5 years from now, what are we going to do? Yeah. Having those conversations early makes it easier later on.
It sure does. Is there anything that we missed? Any last minute, anything we didn't fit in that's important for folks to know?
I don't think so. I think one of the things I'll say one thing. When we're planning for stopping driving, sometimes one of the exercises that I do with people is actually sitting down and looking at how often they drive, and then looking at the cost that it takes to keep a car on the road for a year. And so look at the registration costs, the insurance costs, the inspection costs, changing your snow tires. And even for the basics, it might cost anywhere from, $1,000 to $1,500 a year to keep your car on the road.
Right.
And then if you're only driving it 20 times a year, then that's an easier pill to swallow in terms of, well, if it costs me $40 to take my car out on the road every time I take it on the road, maybe it does make more sense to hire a driver.
You bet. That's great.
Yeah.
Great tip. Well, thank you so much. You've been a
Very
great
welcome.
guest. I really enjoyed this, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
This is Jill Berry Bowen, CEO of Northwestern Medical Center. We've had a great, interesting conversation about driver evaluation and safety. And it's a tough conversation to have, but let's be planning for it. So please drive safely and take care of yourself. I understand that being more fit, eating well, will keep you on the road longer. So thank you for joining us.